Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. One of my subscribers asked if I would do a video on Ike Ibeabuchi, the Nigerian 1990s heavyweight, and someone who, if you know anything about him, if you're old like me and you remember his career, tremendously exciting, powerful, intimidating presence, Ike Ibeabuchi. And I thought, what a good idea. Yeah, let's do a video on that. So I can't remember the subscriber's name, but if you suggested this video, good for you. I like your style. Anyway, Ibeabuchi is almost the personification of the phrase what might have been, because he finished his career in 1999 with a victory over Chris Byrd, who at the time was undefeated in 26 fights. And Byrd, in fact, would go on to be, IBF and WBO heavyweight champion. I mean, he held some belts and beat some very, very good men, including David Tua. More about him later. But Ibeabuchi finished his career with 20 wins, 15 KOs, no draws, no defeats. He's a Nigerian guy. He was, according to BoxRec, only 6'2". I know he wasn't one of the giant heavyweights, but he was built like a unit. I mean, one of those big, tough African fellas that you occasionally get, and very hard hitting, had underrated skills, and had a granite jaw as well. I mean, a terrific chin. Now, he actually got into boxing because I read that he was going to join the military in Nigeria, and instead he saw Buster Douglas upset Mike Tyson, and that kind of got the juices flowing in terms of wanting to be a boxer. He turned pro in 1994, so he only had a 5-year career, and he fought the usual suspects. Actually, they weren't really the usual suspects thinking about it, because they were journeymen that didn't even really have a great presence. I mean, he did fight a few that you would recognise, like Anthony Wade and Calvin Jones. He knocked out in 2 rounds. Jones could give you a few rounds, and he also went the distance, as did everyone else, with a terrific guy, a terrific journeyman called Marion Wilson, who I did a video about some months ago. A guy who had far more losses than wins, but was never, ever stopped. Marion Wilson, a small heavyweight, but incredibly durable. So Ike was, moving up the ladder, trying to find his opportunity, beating all these, sea-level fighters or lower. And then they matched him with David Tua. And this was in 1997, and Tua at the time was undefeated in 27 fights and had fought a much better quality of opposition. He went into the fight as a favourite, Tua. But if you looked at the styles, you knew this was going to be a tear-up. All right. Now, Tua had beaten the most memorable one for me was a 12-second knockout of John Ruiz, who would go on to hold the WBA heavyweight title several times and even beat Holyfield, an older version of Holyfield, post Lennox Lewis. And Ruiz at the time was 25 wins and 2 defeats, and he just Tua came out, and I think it was 20 seconds, 12 to 20 seconds or so in the first round. Tua was even built even sturdier than Ibeabuchi, which is saying something. And he went out, tore after Ruiz, and just knocked him flat. And I mean knocked him out. He was out cold. And Ruiz would recover brilliantly and have a great career. Also fought David Haye, Ruiz did, and I think Hayes' first defence of his WBA heavyweight title. But he also, he also knocked out Darryl Wilson in a round, which was a good result. He stopped David Izon, who was a useful 90s heavyweight, in 12 rounds. Oleg Muskayev, who would go on to hold the WBC heavyweight title, he stopped him in the 11th or 12th round, very late in their fight. And then he was put in with Ibeabuchi, and Ibeabuchi had faced no one apart from low-level journeymen. He goes in with Tua. Tua's expected to win. They have a colossal tear-up, which if you've never seen that fight, go and watch it. I mean, it is 2 bulls just banging heads constantly. Tremendous fight. And Ibeabuchi walked away with a unanimous decision. The cards were very close, I think. I would 71 pointer in it, 115, 130, 114, 130, 115, 114, or 113, 112. I'm doing this off memory, I don't know. The other 2 were pretty close, if I remember rightly as well. But Ibeabuchi got the win. And suddenly that was it. He took on Tua essentially at his own game and beat him, which was regarded as an incredible achievement. Now, after that fight, Ibeabuchi showed some, shall we say, some erratic behaviour, to put it mildly. He was plagued throughout his life, certainly throughout his career, with mental health issues. All right, and I think that he was in. I can't remember the exact details, but there was one instant where he kidnapped a friend's son, a girl he knew, a 15-year-old son, went driving with the kid, and eventually he then crashed the car, and the kid suffered very, very bad injuries. I think he ended up with life-changing injuries where his mobility was limited or something like that. But anyway, Ibeabuchi got only 120 days in jail and was ordered to pay $500,000 in a civil settlement. But the boy, the 15-year-old son of his girlfriend or whatever she was, friend, he was left with very serious injuries in the car crash, and was a totally innocent party. And all Ibeabuchi got was 120 days in the nick. He essentially bought his way out of it, as you do when you've got a bit of money and when you're a bit of a cash cow in America. If you've got the right lawyers, you can escape true justice, which he most certainly did. And part of that was he's got mental health issues, and it was actually a suicide attempt. He crashed the car deliberately, so never mind the poor kid who was left with life-changing injuries. We'll give him a token prison sentence. You can pay £500,000, which is chicken feed because you're going to earn millions, and then normal services resumed. And this is what happened to him. That was only a couple of 2 or 3 months after the Tua win. So even though he was professionally on top of the world, his life was unraveling very badly behind the scenes. Now, I remember at the time when Ibeabuchi was at the height of his status, of his fame within boxing, I was living in America. And I used to watch, Friday night fights. I think it was a Tuesday night fights, wasn't there, as well? And I used to watch HBO, Showtime, and that was where the boxing was. And I can remember I think it was Friday night fights, Max Kellerman, this was before he went to HBO, interviewing Ibeabuchi. And Ibeabuchi he sat there like a silverback gorilla, just talking, looking at Kellerman. Kellerman was giving him questions, and everything was very defensive. He exuded a sort of paranoid menace. And Kellerman looked unnerved when he was asking basic questions. There was nothing really bad about it. He was just asking, like I say, questions about, who he wanted to face. Lennox Lewis at the time was regarded as probably the premier heavyweight, and Ibeabuchi ultimately, wanted to fight him. Now, he went on with his career, and this was post the Tua win, and the world was his oyster. So, he had a couple of fights against journeymen, both of whom he stopped. And then he had his final fight in March of 1999 against Chris Byrd. And like I say, Chris Byrd was 26 wins, no draws and no defeats. And Byrd would go on to win the IBF heavyweight title. And I'm not sure I think he also held the I think when he beat Vitaly Klitschko, he stopped Vitaly, made him retire after 9 rounds with a busted shoulder. I think that was for the WBO title. He then lost that to Vladimir because Vladimir got revenge. But then Byrd carried on as a heavyweight. He was never really a heavyweight at all. He was certainly no bigger than a cruiserweight, but he was so slick and crafty that he was able to outdo bigger fighters. And in fact, he went on to defeat David Tua over 12 rounds. And he had other wins, like he beat Maurice Harris, who was very much a hot and cold fighter. But when he was on, it was a very good heavyweight. He beat Holyfield, an old Holyfield, over 12. He beat Fraser Kendo. I mean, he drew with Gallotta. Again, this was when he was IBF champ, not WBO champ. won a split over Jamil McCline, and then fought Vladimir again and lost. I think he got stopped in 7 rounds, and I think that his career sort of petered out, if I remember rightly, because he lost to Povetkin. I think stopped him late in about 11, and then he went all the way down to light heavyweight, Chris Byrd, and fought a guy called Sean George and got knocked out in 9 rounds. He just lost too much weight, and he looked the part, but sometimes as Angelo Dundee, I always think of this quote: "Light ain't right." But anyway, he was a very, very good fighter. But his first defeat was to none other than Ike Ibeabuchi, and it was a 5th round TKO in March 1999. And again, Ibeabuchi proved that he couldn't just lock horns with a big bull like Tua. He could actually cut off the ring and defeat a real slickster like Chris Byrd. So that was a real feather in his cap. We were thinking, my God, he's not just a banger. He can, he cuts the ring off beautifully. He puts that pressure on, heavy hands. I mean, he genuinely cornered and chopped up Chris Byrd, who would go on to have an excellent career, a really, really good career. But then things really unravelled. Immediately after that, they really, really went to pot. Because Ibeabuchi was at the Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas, and he phoned a local escort service. So he wanted a hooker. A 21-year-old prostitute came to his room. She claims that he attacked her when she demanded that she wanted the money up front. He said, no, I haven't had my oats yet. You'll get the money. And she said, no, I want the money up front. He said, no. So he attacked her. Okay. And there was a similar sexual assault charge from about 8-9 months previously. Anyway, he was eventually, because of his mental health, he was deemed incompetent to stand trial. But he was obviously taken into custody. But he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And the judge granted permission to force medicate him because he was such a danger. I remember scenes of when he was in the court and he was talking over the judge and he was, ranting and raving. And the guy's clearly, way with the fairies. I mean, he really was. But he was incarcerated eventually, and he was given 20 years for sexual assault, a 20-year crime. And that was the end of his career, essentially. He was eventually released in 2015, not having done the full 20, but I think he did about 15 years of the 20. But by that point, he was that would have made him, was in his mid-40s, and his career was essentially over. But since then, I'm not sure whether he's kept his nose clean. I don't think there have been any repeated offences, but he was deported back to Nigeria. Served his time in the US. I'm sure he didn't get many people, treading on his toes inside. Although there are some real gangbangers there, and those American jails are not pleasant places to be, from what I hear. Delighted to say I've never been in one. That was Ike Ibeabuchi. What might have been. Tremendous talent at the absolute height of his powers, looking for Lennox Lewis. Might well have beaten Lennox. Definitely had a chance to beat Lennox, but threw it all away through poor mental health, abuse, sexual assault, and so on. And that's the way it is. Sometimes these things happen, don't they? We hear about, like, for example, another example at the moment would be Scott Fitzgerald in Britain, who showed real talent and he's been in prison, constantly in trouble with the law, constantly suffering from addiction and can't kick it. Sometimes these things happen. So anyway, that's Ike Ibeabuchi for you. I hope you liked the video, and thank you again to my subscriber who suggested it. Please, if you did enjoy the video and you could hit the like button, that'd be great. And also, if you're new to the channel, subscribe and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. I really appreciate your time as always. This is your channel as much as mine. If you don't watch, not a lot of point me talking to myself, is there? So thank you very much. and I will speak to you soon. And bye for now.